Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Who is Allah? What is Allah messenger? Why did God make this word? How many days? What was the purpose of this word of God? This listen to this video together.
My dear brothers and sisters, we have all made vows to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-A'raf, verse 172, and remember when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala extracted from the children of Adam their loins from their backs and made them testify, Alastu bi rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And they said, Qalu bala shahidna, indeed we have testified, so that on the day of judgment we will not be able to say that we were heedless of this affair, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our creator and sustainer. And that was one of the first things that came to my mind, the vow, the covenant that we made with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Greater than any vow that a husband makes to a wife, or a wife to a husband, or a mother to a child, or any other relationship. Yet you see, when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Shaitan has won this battle in distancing us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I want to dedicate this talk to loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again. I want to dedicate this talk to getting to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again, in hopes that we can fulfill our vow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no matter what happens in our lives, no matter how bad that amnesia gets, no matter how bad the accident, we will always know who Allah is and why we love Him. Let's start off by how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us of this in the Quran. The famous verse that all of us know here, we've heard it many, many times, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, that I did not create the mankind and jinn except for my worship. The greatest mufassir of the Quran, Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, he said about this verse that to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You cannot help but to worship Allah and to love Allah and to venerate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-Hashr, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, and do not become of those people who forgot Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them forget themselves. Indeed, these people are the transgressors. Now, there's 2 points in this verse over here. The first point is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not be of those people who forgot Allah. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just doesn't give you a problem, He gives you a solution as well. So the solution to having forgotten Allah is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to tell you who He is 2 verses later, when He goes on to tell us in these 3 beautiful verses who Allah is, which starts off with هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. The most glorious name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Allah. And this is the primary name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the name Allah comes from Al-Ilah, the worshipped, Al-Ma'bud. So Allah is a signification of our worshipping of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to remind us of our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to remind us of our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one of worship, one of servitude. We were created to remember Allah, to venerate Allah, to love Allah, to make sajda to Allah, to make ruku' to Allah. This is our relationship with Him. And this is why throughout the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the term Allah to remind you that the one that created you, the one that sustains you, the one that you call upon is the only one that is worthy of your worship. Get back to the movie. When I asked the man, why was he crying? One of the things he mentioned was that I wish I had a love like this in my life. And I thought to myself, subhanAllah, at that time, that no matter how much love you have in this life, from your friends, from your spouses, from your parents, from everyone else in this world, mistakes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala covers us up just like we use clothes to cover up our bodies. During the time of Musa alayhi salam, rain stopped. So they take him to the hospital. I hurry to the hospital, and I'm looking at my father. And I see this beautiful old man, the man that took care of me when I was young, the man that changed my diapers, the man that took me to school, the man that tried his best to grant me every single thing that I desire. And I realized what a terrible daughter I was to him at that day. So I made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I said, oh Allah, please grant him life so that I can show him the same righteousness that he showed me. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought him out of the heart attack and gave him life for four more months. In these 4 months, she did everything she possibly could. From cooking for him, cleaning for him, driving him to his appointments, any wish or desire that he had, she would be the one fulfilling it. But at the end of the 4 months, she starts to realize that subhanAllah, life is really getting difficult for my father. He can't go to the bathroom on his own. He can't breathe on his own. And while it's great to have him around the house, it's unjust of me to want him to keep being alive but be suffering at the same time. So she makes dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, oh Allah, please do not let him leave this world except in a state of obedience to you. So the day of Jummah comes 4 months later. He goes out for Salatul Jummah. He comes home with his friends and his family, and it's as if he's perfectly fine, perfectly healthy, nothing is wrong at all. He spends the whole day together with his family and friends. They pray Salatul Isha, and the father excuses himself. He says, I'm feeling tired. So the youngest daughter, she takes him upstairs. And not even 5 minutes go Salatul Isha, and the father excuses himself. He says, I'm feeling tired. So the youngest daughter, she takes him upstairs. And not even 5 minutes go by, but she starts shouting, everyone come upstairs, everyone come upstairs. So everyone goes upstairs. And you can imagine as if you're walking into that room, and it is your own father, that his spirit is leaving his body. His eyes are gazing up towards the skies, and his spirit is leaving. And as that is happening, he's saying, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And those are the words that he does.
Found after listening to the video, we want to thank Allah as much as we wish. How much skill God created, many Allah bless us with action. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.